today. And one of the things that TED says when they ask you to do a talk is they said that you try to be vulnerable. And believe me, looking out over all of these people, and also following the amazing speakers I had today, I definitely feel nothing but vulnerable. One thing I do promise you, I'm not a scientist, and I'm not a doctor. I do promise you there are some different types of slides that you've seen before. And I thought I'd start with one up front, which is Gil Scott-Heron. And the reason being is, well, one reason is that because I think he's cool, and this is coming from a guy in a salmon pink piece of knitwear. But I think something more important than that, it was also because what I'm really here to talk about is digital media and pharmaceuticals. And I've been speaking about that for a very long time. And when you say you want to talk to people about pharma, and then you want to talk to them about digital, they're not always very excited about that. So I thought I'd masquerade a little bit and put Gil in there, but I will come back to him at the end. So there's much better people than me to talk about what pharmaceutical companies have achieved, and I'm certainly not going to labour on that. One thing from working for nearly 15 years within the pharmaceutical industry and then trying to help the pharmaceutical industry, I've noticed is that when medicine works well, it's a partnership. Either a partnership between healthcare professionals working with multidisciplinary teams, or partnerships between healthcare professionals and patients coming together themselves to form organisations or now groups online, and of course governments as well. And have been some amazing success. So if we look at acute lymphoblastic lymphoma, if you were diagnosed with that as a child, it's one of the most common cancers in children, in the 1960s, there was a less than 10% chance that you would be alive in 5 years. Now, if you were diagnosed with that between 2000 and 2005, there's over a 90% chance. If you look at HIV, it's been spoken about a number of times today. This is an incredibly challenging and controversial area, but the truth is that when I was very young, I remember advertisements in the UK with tombstones where HIV was a death sentence. And I know from working within pharmaceutical companies that have drugs in this area that it now, if with a fair wind and a whole number of other factors, you can live, certainly in the UK and in large parts of Western Europe, with HIV as almost a chronic condition, maybe possibly even similar to diabetes. Was that just pharmaceuticals? No, absolutely not. It was a combination, sometimes a challenging combination. But something happened to me when I was young. When I was 19, my brother died, he was 17 at the time. And I was studying ancient history, and I had no interest really, of course, in pharmaceuticals or medicine. But in being interested in how we could bring better therapies to the market, I wanted to join a pharmaceutical company and see what I can do. But something else then happened. A massive revolution in communications and digital media also took place. But I'd gone through this for 13, 14 years, trying to do things differently. And there came a break point where I had the opportunity to change what I was doing. And I seriously thought about doing so. Two things stopped me. One thing I've spoken about with my personal story and interest in my brother. The second thing was something else, which is that my passion is for digital and for technology and for innovation of that kind. I was rereading Steve Jobs' biography. And towards the end of it, tucked away, there was a little passage where he was speaking to his biographer, Walter Isaacson, and he said, look, if the 20th century in digital was about the intersection between the humanities and the arts and digital, which is, I suppose, exactly where Apple were, then the 21st century is that intersection between digital and medicine and healthcare. And it is the most exciting time to be working in either of those fields, and especially if those fields are brought together. But also, it's not going to come as a surprise to people to know that pharmaceutical companies don't always have the best reputation. And although I've been very publicly out there as a pharma person in virtually every social platform, I never encountered any personal hostility. The guy on screen there, Dr. Ben Goldacre, has written a book this year, or actually over the last few years, but published this year, called Bad Pharma, where he looks to expose certain wrongdoings with regard to transparency of data. And all the time that I've worked in the industry, I've known that there were challenges, but I didn't think of it as bad. And I still do. But it does face some massive challenges. Not being, as I said, a scientist myself or a doctor, I'm not going to take on some of those challenges today with regard to pipeline, or possibly even straight on with regard to data. But I would like to draw a bit of a parallel between the way big pharma is at the moment and something that happened a long, long time ago. And that's about 66 million years ago, give or take, I think about 11,000 years. A massive asteroid plunged into the Earth, in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. And even though it was contentious for a while, scientists now agree, in fact I think it was 2010, that they finally came to some kind of consensus, that this was the primary reason that dinosaurs actually became extinct. But the thing and the interesting point for me is that that took thousands of years. In that time, dinosaurs continued to eat and drink and sleep and do other things that dinosaurs do, not knowing that they were already dead. And that's how I frame it for farmer. Do I think farmers are going to die? Well, no, although everything changes. The point being that if you think you can keep the status quo in the way you communicate with healthcare professionals, the way you present and communicate yourself to patients and to the general public, because at the moment nothing seems to have changed, I think you're mistaken. So, I'm obviously not going to solve any problems here about health economics or pipeline or market access for medication, or any of the amazing things that I've heard today myself while I've been at this conference. But I do have 5 little things that, from a digital professional, I think that pharma could do in order to improve its reputation. The first is building new relationships. So this isn't new, but the truth is that pharma is still very narrow in its field of communication. That's why when a book like Bad Pharma comes out, whether there's things in it that are right or wrong, people are very quick to believe that pharma is like the arms industry or the tobacco industry, not the industry that I know that has done the things that it has in cancer and HIV. And that's because, in my view, that it concentrates on building medicines and not building relationships. The thing about digital is, you can again concentrate on building things. You can build websites, you can build applications, you can build a whole load of things. And farmers built thousands of websites that virtually nobody's gone to, and a whole load of other things. But the point is, anyone can build a website. What's hard is to build real relationships with people. An interesting study I was shown, not too long ago, looked at a survey that was done with young people. And it was in the context of how society, or people's perceptions of society, has changed with regard to the massive communication, the explosion that we've had in communication over the last 8 years. What was interesting is that if you'd asked me when I was a child, or when I was young, what superpower I wanted, I'd probably have gone more along the flying, invisibility, Superman route. I don't actually think Batman has a superpower, and I'm not really sure about Wonder Woman, although she looks good in hot pants, obviously. The point being that young people, for all that they are castigated, they didn't say that at all. Young people actually said they just wanted to be able to communicate with the world. They wanted to communicate with everyone, and they wanted to comfort people. So it's reaching out and connecting with people. They didn't want language to get in the way, and they wanted to be able to comfort people. And actually, social is the entire DNA, not just of digital, but also of health on the web. It's what binds everything together. There's nothing really that isn't social. We thought that the real revolution in the internet was democratization of information, that now anyone could get information. But then we realised, just like we have, say, with the Arab Spring, or a whole host of other massive examples that we can give that are going on right now in places like Saudi Arabia, it's not access to information, it's access to each other that matters. A friend of mine put it much better than me, not for the first time, when he said that conversation is the most powerful application in healthcare. So that's a big claim. But I think it has some substance. And what I'd like to do is go back what seems like ages now, it certainly is in a way in the digital world, which is 5 years, to when Clay Shirky first came out with Here Comes Everybody. It was a book about the internet and how society's changed and people being able to come together. And what he showed was, or what he said in that book, was that if you look at something as simple as Flickr, a place where you can share photographs, it very quickly became somewhere not just where you shared photographs, it became somewhere where you grouped together with people that like the same kind of photography as you. And what we could see is that within a short space of time, techniques that would have taken years to filter down from the professional photographer to the person on the street then took weeks or months. So what does that mean if you translate that into health online? Well, if you map health online, it's incredibly fascinating and very, very powerful. We have a massive personal communication, people reaching out personally to help each other and to support each other, or just to share information that they've found about a condition that they have an interest in. The second one is the communities of practice that I was alluding to with Flickr. If you can do that with photography, imagine what you can do when you bring people together who have the same cause of trying to improve treatment and care when it comes to any kind of medical condition. Recently, I was on a forum and I saw a guy come on, a 59-year-old guy. He said he'd just been diagnosed or been given the results of a biopsy on the phone, which said that he had stage 3 lung cancer. He didn't know much more than that. I couldn't believe that that's how he would be given that news, but it seems that was the case. But within 30 minutes, there was nearly 130 people that had come on to support it. And I don't mean messages of support like, I hope things go well, or, I'm thinking of you type things. I mean other patients, I mean oncologists, I mean people giving really powerful advice. That is where pharma has to be in the future, building and supporting these relationships. I've even talking about the public, Wikipedia, the most comprehensive and in some ways most accurate whole collection of information on health there is. Or even civically, when we talk about groups like Patients Like Me, that are looking to actually change the whole way that we think about our own health data. Secondly, focus on healthcare and not the illness. Now this, I find interesting because we've spoken about this in pharma for a long time, and today there's been lots of talks saying that actually isn't it more important to focus on being well than it is to step in when somebody's ill. And of course that's true, but by the very nature of pharma's business it's very difficult for it to do. But the world is changing. So something called the quantified self, a term coined in 2007, it's really talking about how people can use digital devices or technology to track and monitor and better help them manage their healthcare. But the truth is that we knew anyway that if someone was prepared to monitor it and even went into a doctor with a piece of paper, they were much, much more likely to get better treatment and certainly much more likely to get better access to medications. But then we look at other businesses that are now seeing themselves as healthcare businesses. So while pharma has been talking about being a healthcare business for years but not doing maybe as much as it could, we now have technology businesses like IBM. This is Watson, it's a lot smaller than that now. It's an artificial intelligence engine. They think that by 2020 that this will be on a smartphone. What it does is that within seconds it actually analyses all of the known published scientific data there is and makes a diagnosis in real time for the patient. At the moment they're working on it with oncologists. Nike, in stuff they're doing with the fuel band, they, incredibly really have gone from being a company that sells trainers to being a business that now is trying to motivate and help people manage their health better. Even Coke, so we think about Coca-Cola, they're talking about becoming powerful within the means of communicating to people about healthcare, helping them manage their health better. And I heard the other day that McDonald's were actually taking an active interest in trying to help manage people's obesity, which I'm not going to comment on, but if pharma struggles to become a healthcare business, and yet McDonald's think it can, then I think that we've got something to sort out. Third is data. So there's much more qualified people to talk about big data than me. Most of the data you get exposed to when you're a pharmaceutical person is clinical trials, very controlled data. But actually, because of the explosion in communication channels, incredible amounts of information about people's health is pumped out into the public ether every single day. In fact, 50 petabytes of data is a bit ago now, so it's probably more, was thought to be in the healthcare realm, which as you can see is the entire written works of mankind from the beginning of recorded history and in all languages, which is a lot. The point being that, what could we do with that data? Because data is meaningless, really. It's an abstraction. What you need is to have understanding and knowledge from that. This quick example here is that in 2010, we were able to track the outbreak of cholera within Haiti after the catastrophe of the earthquake, using Twitter alone, 2 weeks before health officials could do on the ground. So what does that mean for pharma? Well, for pharma, it touches on some of the things that I've heard spoken about today. But unfortunately, there's a big reticence to get involved. Imagine what you could do with that data to understand how people take their medications, what symptoms they're taking the medication for, whether they're adherent, so to speak, to their medication. Also, how people broadly manage their health, and of course the side effects. The problem is that pharma is focusing too much on how it captures adverse events, as we've already heard about, rather than the massive capacity to better understand how to manage people's health. And I think that's a massive opportunity. 4 is redefine our relationship with healthcare professionals. So firstly, do they need to be redefined? Yes, I think they do. Pharma's concentrated very much on marketing, and marketing is normally bar charts. And healthcare professionals have stopped seeing people. From pharmaceutical business, not all, but it's going down. What is interesting is that we look at Starbucks. Starbucks sells coffee, of course. But actually, Starbucks also says that it's a technology business. But with regard to pharma, they're so focused on their brands and their products that sometimes we've not been able to look beyond that and see how we can use technology to better support our healthcare professionals. In a brief period of time that I had away from directly serving pharmaceuticals, and it was quite brief, I spoke to hundreds of doctors about what they would really want from pharma through digital media and technical innovation. And it wasn't unanimous, but a large percentage of people said they really needed support at the point of care with what pharma knows the most about, which is their medicines. And actually, if we look at some examples from the US, Doximity and iRounds, Doximity is a network for doctors, has about 10-11% of all doctors in the US, but they have a specific stated aim, which is to improve the fifth largest cause of death in the US, which is through medical errors and mistakes. iRounds wants to be a Twitter at the point of care. This is something that's a massive opportunity for pharmaceutical companies. But first, we have to do something a bit differently. So one thing that I do know about is digital design. One of the principles of user-centered design is working from the world and working from the head. So what that means is, if you work from the world, then you have to do things often slower, but you can learn as you go along. So a keyboard, when you first have a keyboard, you have to work out where the different keys are. It takes a long time. I still look a bit like that sometimes. And once you understand how to use it, you then work from the head. It's so much faster, it's so much more efficient. But if somebody changed the layout of that keyboard, you'd be lost. And I believe at the moment, what healthcare professionals want from pharmaceutical businesses, that we could deliver through digital innovation. We're working from the world, and we're working from the head, apologies, and we really need to go back to working from the world to build a different type of relationship. In fact, that points to one thing on the question I have really, which is, could digital enable us to have a completely different level of collaboration with healthcare professionals? And finally, turn on, tune in, drop out. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, well, I don't mean that I think pharma professionals should drop acid or smoke a joint. I do think they should turn up. And I also, not so sure they should drop out, but they just need to do this. The guy who said that, Timothy Leary, a psychologist who was a key figure in the counterculture in the late 1960s, who used LSD to treat patients, he didn't really care that it was LSD. It was just a vehicle in order to give him a different viewpoint on the world. And this is what I would like pharma to be digital for. For example, we've already heard today about gaming. Actually, gaming is incredibly powerful when it comes to recovery from stroke or from Parkinson's disease. We see gamified motivational techniques used to diagnose malaria. Yet, very few of those things are filtered into the pharmaceutical industry. Look at things like this. Can an app treat depression? Well, some evidence suggests that some might be able to help treat depression. The point being that we've set the bar so low that we're not thinking about not just beyond the pill, but what we could do instead of the pill. And finally, if we think about this in the context of the big word, which is crowdsourcing or collaboration, what does that really mean for a pharma business? Well, it means something simple to me, which is no matter how many talented or amazing people you have in your organisation, there's absolutely no doubt that other people out there that may be more talented, but more importantly, when they're together, they can be even more powerful. So Boehringer used a gamified science crowdsourcing platform, which helped it refine an algorithm for getting a real biological endpoint to publicly available molecular data that was at least as good as the academics, but when speaking to them, thought could be even better than the academics. So, my final point is this, is that with regard to the future of healthcare for pharma, it has to be prepared to fail. Because as a digital professional, the great thing for me is that I fail every single day of my life. The one thing about digital is we know where we're failing and we're always trying to improve and get better. And if we're not failing, then we're not innovating. And so for me, the Gil Scott Heron point is that when he was distilling the social upheaval of the late 1960s in America into the song "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," when he was asked about that, he said it wasn't about what people were saying it was about. It wasn't about, marketing messages, the commercialization of the world, the fact that no one's going to go on TV and tell you that, the revolution has started. What he was saying is that revolutions start in the head. Actually, this is about philosophy. too much of the discussion in pharma, I feel, is not about the right thing, which is changing our philosophy and the way that we see the world. It's about just the technology and how we implement digital. So my hope and my final thought is that we, as an industry, of which I am part, can do things better and can utilise digital to actually become a genuine partner and collaborator in the broader world of healthcare. And with that, I say thanks very much.